The transition to the next host for The Tonight Show on NBC after Carson's departure was anything but smooth. At the time, the most obvious choice was David Letterman. Letterman was a regular guest host for Carson and had his own late-night talk show immediately following Johnny Carson called Late Night with David Letterman. But the execs at NBC decided to go with then little-known comedian and occasional TV actor Jay Leno, but more on him later. Now, David Letterman, upset by this news, was able to hide his anger somewhat.
Oh, man.
Well, why don't I just start off with a question here? Just how pissed off are you? I've never asked that question in many years.
Johnny, let me give you a little piece of advice. You keep using language like that, and you're going to find yourself out of a job.
But Letterman took control of the situation and moved his show over to CBS and was given his own late-night talk show that would air at the same time slot as Jay Leno's Tonight Show. Letterman formatted his show on CBS very similar to his late-night show on NBC. Since his show on NBC was right after Carson, he didn't want to make an exact copy. So Dave took a page from Steve Allen and pushed more of a variety show with physical stunts such as wearing a suit made from Alka-Seltzer and being dropped into a tub of water. Where Johnny had reoccurring segments like Karnak the Magnificent and Stump the Band, Dave had Stupid Human Tricks and his top 10 list. Dave also ditched the sidekick who would sit at the desk and gave that role to his band leader, Paul Schaefer, a trend that almost every late-night show host today has stuck with. Letterman was also not the family-friendly, loves-everyone kind of guy that Carson was either. His show on CBS was filled with controversy, from Madonna cussing up a storm leading to the most censored late-night interview in history, to Drew Barrymore flashing her breasts, to his more intense feuds with Republican politicians and his ongoing battle with Bill O'Reilly. Letterman also started doing something that is commonplace in TV today, and that is to book guests who hate each other on the same show to create fake fights, which was great for ratings. Letterman and his show was also constantly criticized for being misogynistic. His staff consisted of mostly men, same with his guests, and the women who did end up working for him said that he sexually harassed him. But despite the scandals, Letterman had a huge influence on the television industry and pushing the boundaries. As the Reagan era was ending and the digital age was budding, Letterman was able to offer audiences a show that stuck to its values and one that didn't mind telling a pompous celebrity or politician that they were a terrible person. The late night show filled that quirky, crazy, outlandish void that Carson's show didn't have and that the younger generation craved. Letterman was a man who told it how it was and turned late night upside down and gave Jay Leno and the execs at NBC a battle for ratings, which was not something they were used to when Carson was the host of The Tonight Show. So when NBC announced that Jay Leno was going to be the new Tonight Show host, replacing Carson, a lot of people were shocked. Compared to Letterman, Leno had a very short resume, but NBC wanted the baby boomers to watch their show, and by the 1990s, the boomers made up almost half of the TV-watching population, and many of them loved Leno and his style of comedy. By 1991, NBC executives were getting restless and wanted Carson out and Jay Leno in. So they leaked a story to the press that said NBC looking to dump Carson for Leno. That leaked story started a buzz and the word was out. Carson had been cornered, so Carson left and Leno was in. Leno followed very closely into what Carson had already perfected. He kept it safe, just as Johnny had done. Jay was able to do something that Letterman couldn't or wouldn't, and that was to appeal to a wider audience. Letterman stated his political opinions very strongly, and guests were even sometimes intimidated by him. Jay Leno was a fun, warm kind of guy who was a comedian first and a talk show host second. He made jokes about both sides in politics and helped mold some of the most famous comedians we know today. But other than that, Leno's show was pretty uneventful, and that's what people who didn't watch Letterman wanted. 2 decades of Republican leadership was ending, the internet was this new potential game changer, and the economy was improving greatly. Some people wanted stability and normalcy, and Jay Leno fit that mold. The ratings between Leno and Letterman were ever changing, always one within just a few points of each other. But neither tried to change their show in order to get that wider audience. Letterman was still doing stunts, and Leno was still doing what he did best, stand-up. Leno loved doing stand-up so much that he toured and did 150 stand-up shows a year while still hosting The Tonight Show every weeknight. But unfortunately, the end of Jay Leno's late-night talk show career was anything but smooth. After NBC pushed Leno out and gave the new host of The Tonight Show to Conan O'Brien, things took a turn. Leno, still wanting to have his own show, created The Jay Leno Show to air just before The Tonight Show. But with The Tonight Show with Conan O'Brien and The Jay Leno Show being massive disasters, the execs at NBC decided to move Jay Leno's show to the old Tonight Show time slot and The Tonight Show time slot to immediately follow after, resulting in Conan O'Brien being back in the same spot he was before Leno retired. So O'Brien quit and moved his show to cable, pioneering a new road of late-night talk shows away from the networks. But let's pause here real quick so I can talk about a comedian and a host who I think had the most influence on society, Arsenio Hall. Hall was the guest host of The Late Show starring Joan Rivers for a few months before he unveiled his own talk show, The Arsenio Hall Show. This show was distributed by CBS across a variety of channels, and it was an instant success because it featured something that no other talk show at the time had, a black host. Hall's show spoke to the urban crowds and didn't offer a direct competition to Carson's show because people of color and the younger generation weren't watching Carson's show anyways. But while Hall's show was only on the air for 5 years, his lasting legacy and societal influence very well could be his role in helping Bill Clinton be elected president. In 1992, Bill Clinton was running for president against then incumbent President George H. Bush, who was running for re-election. With polling numbers dropping, Clinton's campaign manager booked him an interview on Hall's show. But it was originally just supposed to be a straight interview. But Hall wasn't going to have any of that. He wanted the presidential candidate to shine, and the result of that was one of the greatest openings of a talk show ever. But the funny thing is, playing the sax with the house band and wearing sunglasses was not Bill's idea, it was Hall's.
People, I mean, it's iconic. I mean, there's this picture of him playing the sax on your show has been played and played and played. Did you have to talk to him into that?
Oh yeah, we talked him into everything you see. Those are my sunglasses. I talked him into wearing those. That's my tie. I talked him into wearing that. But you don't talk people into that when you have them on the phone from Arkansas.
No.
You wait till they get at the studio.
That's right.
Why don't you do this and that?
You ask for all that stuff, and even Hillary, because Hillary wasn't scheduled to come out. And I'm like, hey, in the third segment, you think Hill Dog could join me? You know?
So had Clinton's appearance on the show just been a straightforward interview, it may have been forgotten overnight. But by showing Clinton jamming on the sax, his appearance towards the younger, newer voting audience that watched the Arsenio Hall show skyrocketed. Just 4 months later, that sax-playing man who before the show's appearance was the lowest in the polling was elected president by a landslide. While many people think that there were many other contributing factors to Clinton winning the election, his appearance on Hall's show sure didn't hurt, and proved the power of the late-night talk show and its influence on society. Now that we took that little detour, let's get back to Conan. O'Brien got his stardom by being on Saturday Night Live, a place where many late-night talk show hosts get their beginnings now. And after SNL, he worked as a writer for The Simpsons from '91 to '93, or what I like to call the good years of The Simpsons. And then, much like Letterman in the 80s, O'Brien had his own late-night talk show that immediately followed Jay Leno's Tonight Show. So obviously, when Leno was reaching retirement and his contract was ending, O'Brien thought he was a shoo-in, and he was, for 6 short months, before Jay Leno and his ego, wanted his original time slot back. So, to make a long story short, O'Brien packed up and moved to a place many network talk show hosts had never ventured: basic cable. So on November 8, 2010, Conan debuted on TBS.
Don't do it, Conan!
Larry King?
I'm your guardian angel.
But you're not dead.
Never mind that. I have 2 words for you. Basic cable.
Basic cable.
Conan, I think you'll find our terms very attractive. I think we have a deal.
The show was a hit with younger audiences who had followed Conan from his late night to The Tonight Show and finally over to his cable show, and his numbers stayed high even through current. As the 2010s rolled on, Conan had a lot more to compete with compared to his predecessors. Not only did he have network late-night shows to compete with, but more politically driven talk shows like The Daily Show with Jon Stewart and The Colbert Report were getting millions of young viewers every night, also on basic cable. But Conan did what he always wanted to do, and that was to entertain and tell some jokes. His basic cable show was structured very much in the same as other network late-night talk shows, featuring a monologue, guests, a sidekick, a house band, and ending with a musical number. But basic cable gave Conan the freedom to do what other late-night talk shows hosts couldn't or didn't want to do, like hosting a show for a week in Cuba or Mexico. He also realized that his key demographic was used to DVR and on-demand watching of TV shows. No more did people all sit around the TV at a certain time to watch a show. So he launched a website that featured all of his interviews, monologues, and skits listed for people to watch whenever they wanted. The advertisers simply got their money from online ads rather than from TV ads. Although Conan's show is different than the late-night talk shows we have now of Fallon, Colbert, and Kimmel, he's one of the last pioneers and the last of the old style that did comedy and celebrity guests with some acts here and there. Conan is offering a new take on the old style versus a new style entirely with tiny sprinklings of the old like we currently have in late-night TV.